Welcome back, you guys, and let's talk about some players that are going to be very important to their team's chances to advancing in the NBA playoffs. When I'm picking X factors for playoff teams, I'm looking at someone who can create a larger margin of error for their team. This could be an off-the-bench player or someone in the starting lineup. We got 8 I want to talk about. The first X factor I have is Jimmy Butler, and I was thinking about putting JJ Redick here, but we know what JJ is going to give to Philly. Jimmy, on the other hand, is somebody who can create a bigger margin of error for Philly to help them get past Brooklyn, and somebody they're going to desperately need to compete against Toronto. Even though Philly's starting 5 is statistically dominant, the talent fit is kind of weird, and Jimmy is playing kind of like a souped up version of 2015 Andre Iguodala. Their bench is cooked, so you gotta count on the starters putting up like 90 points a night. The Sixers made the trade for Jimmy because they need something other than a Joel Embiid post-up in crunch time. Ben Simmons can't run a pick and roll, so he's a non-factor. We've seen a few times this year where Jimmy has made tough shots in fourth quarters, which was something they couldn't rely on last year. Their best player, Joel Embiid, is going into the playoffs injured, which is going to make their defense beatable. Jimmy is going to be assigned onto them for parts of the game. Are we going to see an engaged all-defense Jimmy in the playoffs? If Philly wants to beat Brooklyn and make a competitive series against Toronto, they're going to need Minnesota Jimmy Butler, the guy who will get you a bucket in crunch time and get you stops. Monta Morris is Denver Nuggets' X factor, and if they want to take advantage of avoiding the Houston and Golden State part of the bracket and make a conference finals run, they're going to need Monta's dependable creation. If you did not notice, their young backcourt in Jamal Murray and Gary Harris have flatlined for part of the year. Harris was out of rhythm because of injuries, and Jamal Murray's problem is that he's a 22-year-old point guard still learning the NBA game. Both of them going into this year were expected to take larger leaps, but that wasn't the case for parts of the season. Multiple times this year, Monta Morris would get the start over Jamal Murray and even close some games. If you watch my videos, you're probably familiar with Morris's game. I think Funky said it on one of his videos. Morris is built by the efficiency gods. The guy just makes smart decision after smart decision. He rarely turns the ball over and makes 41% of his three-point shots, which is a great percentage. He's everything you want in a backup point guard and is going to be looked at to slow things down in case Denver is in a rut. If Murray and Harris have early struggles against San Antonio and can't get it going on the perimeter to help out Jokic, then Monta Morris is going to be relied upon heavily. In a playoff series, there's only so many possessions you have, so you better divide them up to the people that use them efficiently. Morris is definitely one of those guys. Al Horford is one of 2 Boston Celtics on my X Factor list. When Al is healthy, he is one of the best centers you can have in the postseason because he can defend several positions, stay out of foul trouble, space the floor, and make smart passes. Kyrie is the best player on the team, but Al is the guy holding everything down on both sides of the floor. Even though they were well short of that 67-win prediction, this team still shows us proof that an Eastern Conference final team exists in Boston. Fortunately for Horford, his kryptonite will not be in the playoffs. There's no Tristan Thompson this time around to bother him. For some reason, Al Horford can play sound defense on Giannis, then on the next night, he can bother Joel Embiid from getting post position, but when he's matched up against Tristan Thompson, he's an ineffective player. It's going to be interesting to see how the Celtics attack Milwaukee if they advance, because they aren't a heavy pick and roll team. Instead of running high ball screens like the majority of the league, the Celtics like to get it going in transition, running off ball stuff for three-pointers, and whipping the ball around the three-point line. But I think that's going to change a bit in the playoffs if they want to win against Milwaukee. There's going to be a lot more Kyrie-Horford pick and roll, then on the next possession, Horford-Kyrie dribble handoff, then on the next one, Kyrie-Horford pick and roll. You get what I'm saying. What makes it so hard to stop Horford is that he's not only a good screener, but he can pop out for a 3 or make a play off the dribble if you can test out too far. At times, he's going to find himself matched up on Giannis in the fourth quarter. I'm going to be paying attention to that matchup because if Horford has some success, Boston can definitely push that series to 6 or 7 games. Next player I got on here is Chris Paul, and I was thinking about putting Eric Gordon on here because when he is in rhythm from the three-point line and getting to the free throw line, he makes Houston's margin of error so much bigger. It takes a lot of pressure off of James Harden from having to expend energy driving to the rim and taking those step-back threes. But I gotta go with Chris Paul. He's obviously not the best player, but he is very crucial to increasing that margin of error. If you remember last season, Chris Paul in isolation was basically a guaranteed bucket. In 5 games in the Utah series last year, he averaged 25 points, 6 assists, and scored 41 points in the series clinching win. Now, CP3 hasn't been the isolation god he was last year. He's definitely a step slower, but since the All-Star break, he has looked healthy, and he has that jump in his step to create separation once his hip is past the screen. Can he create separation against Jazz defenders for a second year in a row and spare Harden about 18 points a night? The thing we know about CP3 is that his body breaks down as the playoffs go on, so it's possible that playing Golden State earlier in the playoffs bodes well for him. If Houston wants to force 7 games again against Golden State, they're going to need that CP3 who is making tough shot after tough shot in games 4 and 5, because we all know that an engaged Golden State offense is going to put up points. My 6th X Factor is Raptors point guard Kyle Lowry. The Raptors have a bunch of guys who can be their X Factor. I can definitely see Norman Powell playing a big role in the playoffs. Kyle is on record saying that he doesn't have to score as much as he used to and can lead with his defense, effort, and passing. I expect him to do that. He does those things well. Kyle has underperformed in certain playoff rounds, but he's also had some good ones like the 2016 conference semifinals versus Miami. He can rewrite his narrative this postseason. For stretches of the season, Kyle has gone several possessions passing up open shots and completely forgetting about his offense. Kawhi and Pascal, those two are going to cook, but Toronto needs that second perimeter scorer to keep the defenses honest. They need that guy who can pull up from 3 off pick and rolls. Kyle can do that. He can play defense and make passes with the best of them, but I can see Toronto having some struggle games because Kyle's like 8 points on 2 for 6 shooting going into the 4th quarter. If Kyle is scoring in the high teens with his defense and passing, that projected conference finals against the Bucks can be an easier series for them. The best player on this X Factor list is Paul George. Usually the X Factors are not the best players on the team, but when the success of a team's offense is dictated by how well one player is shooting, then it'd be wrong not to include PG. Russell Westbrook is shooting better from 3 over the past 2 months, but he's still having statistically one of the worst volume shooting seasons ever, plus Steven Adams is slightly injured, so you gotta pay attention to that. OKC's chances of making the Western Conference Finals lean on Paul George making everything, and when he's not hitting shots, they are a very easy team to guard. If he gets to 90% of what he was during that MVP stretch, then I'm gonna trust OKC. He's so important that him not being at 100% is huge and cuts down their margin of error. What made PG's MVP stretch so great was that a lot of the shots he was taking and making were very difficult and in close games. In February, he was taking 14 3-point shots a game. The whole point in believing in OKC's conference finals chances is mainly because of PG and Westbrook, and if PG's a little bit off, it cuts down that margin of error. We're going to find out in a week if Paul George's shoulder is a steady problem or something that's just going to be in the past. My second to last X Factor on the video is Gordon Hayward. If you haven't been paying attention, Gordon Hayward has picked it up a bit as a scorer in the past few weeks and fits my bill perfectly as an X Factor. If Hayward is scoring around 15 points efficiently in the playoffs, Boston becomes a much different team. Hayward isn't just someone who can get going as a standstill shooter, but he can flip between being a primary and secondary ball handler. Hayward being somewhat back is part of the reason why we haven't completely written off the Celtics just yet. Not many teams can bring a 6'8" wing player off the bench that can shoot, handle the ball, and pass. Unfortunately, he's been pretty tough to watch for most of the year. He doesn't have that same 1-foot leaping ability when he's going for layups, which has hurt his driving ability. If Hayward can be effective as a passer and shooter, it's going to give them a much better chance to push Milwaukee. The last X Factor I got on here is Eric Bledsoe, the man who was in the middle of his best offensive season and back to playing defense just like when he was back on the Clippers. If last year's Bucks-Celtics series was the last time you watched basketball and you decided to turn on the Bucks in 2019, you would not recognize this version of Eric Bledsoe. Eric Bledsoe lost minutes in part of the first round series against Boston because he was losing his matchup to Terry Rozier. 50-year-old Jason Terry got put in the game over him sometimes. But this year, Eric has been a borderline all-star and probably getting onto one of the all-defensive teams. He made a transformation from last year and it got him a contract extension. If you watched that one game against the Rockets where Giannis was struggling to get it going offensively, Bledsoe was able to pick up the slack that Giannis usually fills. He was playing defense, making threes, and getting to the free throw line. But this time, it's not going to be Terry Rozier matched up against him in the second round. It's going to be Kyrie most of the time, which is a whole nother assignment. Malcolm Brogdon is going to miss the first round and might miss the second round against Boston, so Bledsoe has some extra shoes to fill. If he's playing at an all-NBA level on defense and scoring close to 20 points a game, the games for Milwaukee are going to be that much easier. If you made it to the end, shout out to you. Let me know if you think there's someone else who can increase their team's margin of error that should have been in the video. I'm going to be on Twitter during the NBA playoff games, so be sure to follow me if you want. I'll see you guys soon.